My name is Amelia Morgan, 30 years old, and until this past Christmas, I was the financial backbone of my family. For 7 years, I paid their debts, funded their whims, and asked for nothing in return. Until that morning, Christmas morning, when my sister Stephanie, with a smug grin, announced, "We had a family vote. Amelia is no longer our sister." The shock? It didn't crush me. Not entirely, because I was ready. While their faces basked in the cruel glow of their own audacity, I reached into my leather messenger bag and pulled out a red folder. I placed it under the Christmas tree. Their laughter faded. The air shifted. You see, I wasn't always the outsider. I grew up in a modest Boston home. My dad was an engineer, Mom a schoolteacher. Stephanie, 3 years younger, was the darling. Beautiful, charming. Drew, the baby, was athletic, entitled, and always bailed out. When I was 16, our dad left. Divorced us. Ran off with his assistant to California. Mom crumbled. Married Jack, a passive insurance guy who never spoke up. And then Mom's mantra began. Family is all we have. Those words became the chains that bound me. I studied hard, earned a scholarship to Boston University, became a financial analyst by 22. My salary was more than my parents had ever dreamed of. And right on cue, the requests started pouring in. Stephanie's car broke down, $2,800. Drew needed a coding boot camp, $1,500. Property taxes. Jack's hours got cut. Emergency after emergency. I paid it all, quietly. And they praised me, not for who I was, but for what I could give. My achievements became ATM receipts. I should have walked away years ago, but I didn't. I wanted to believe family could change. That love meant sacrifice. That one day, I'd be appreciated. I was wrong. But that Christmas morning, as they laughed and excluded me from the family I'd built my life around, they made one fatal mistake. They underestimated me. Because under that tree wasn't just a red folder. It was every lie, every dollar, every betrayal, documented, recorded, and about to blow their perfect image apart. The room went quiet as the red folder hit the floor under the Christmas tree. No one moved. No one laughed anymore. Stephanie's smirk faltered. Drew looked up from his phone. Mom stiffened in her seat, her hot cocoa suddenly forgotten. I bent down slowly, picked the folder back up, and held it in my lap. "You want to vote me out?" I said, my voice calm. "Fine. But if we're going to sever ties, let's at least be clear on what's being lost." I opened it. The first page? A spreadsheet. Detailed. Color-coded. Dated. Over $137,000 transferred. Over 7 years. From me to them. Car repairs for Stephanie. Bail money for Drew. Rent coverage. Tuition deposits. A $5,000 wire for Mom and Jack's anniversary cruise. Every dollar accounted for. I passed copies around the room. Stephanie's jaw tightened. "You kept records?" I met her eyes. "Of course. I'm a financial analyst. And you never paid me back. Not once." Drew laughed nervously. "It's not like we asked for all that." I flipped to the next tab. Screenshots. Text messages. Emails. Voicemails. Each one politely asking, pleading, demanding. Each one signed with some version of, "You're the only one who can help, Amelia." Then came the real shocker. The deed. To Amelia Morgan, it read, co-owner of 27 Bramble Lane. Their house. The very house they now sat in. "Grandpa left me 40% of this place in his will," I said. "Mom signed it over without reading the fine print. It's in my name. I've just been paying the taxes for the last 3 years." Mom gasped. "That's not possible." I looked at her. "It's legal, and I have the title." The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was fear. Because for the first time, I wasn't just the giver. I was the one holding the truth, And they knew. They had made a terrible mistake. The silence didn't last long. Stephanie was the first to speak, her voice shrill and defensive. "You seriously kept receipts? Like, who does that?" "I do," I replied evenly. "Because trust without accountability? That's how you all operated. Not me." Mom clutched her chest like I'd just slapped her. "Amelia, this is so cruel. It's Christmas. You're turning this into a courtroom." I raised an eyebrow. "You kicked me out of the family this morning. On Christmas. After everything I've done. And I'm the one ruining the holiday?" Jack finally spoke for once. "Let's all calm down. This doesn't need to be a war." Drew scoffed. "Come on, Amelia. You're acting like we're villains. You helped us because you wanted to. No one forced you." I turned the page in the folder. Page 6. The message you sent me the day before my rent was due, threatening to never speak to me again if I didn't send you $3,000 for your life-changing app idea. Ring a bell? He went pale. Stephanie tried a new angle. "Look, if you wanted boundaries, you could have just said so. You didn't have to blindside us like this." I almost laughed. "I tried," I said. "For years. I asked for repayment plans. I asked for respect. I asked to not be the only one sacrificing. You ignored me. Or worse, guilt-tripped me," Mom finally snapped. "So what now? You want revenge? You gonna sue us? Throw us out of the house?" I took a deep breath. "No. I just want the truth to sit in this room as loudly as your vote did. I want you to feel the weight of what you thought I'd never carry." Their faces fell. Because they realized something they never thought possible. I wasn't begging to belong anymore. I was deciding who deserved to stay in my life. I sat down, red folder still open on my lap, and looked each of them in the eyes. Stephanie. Drew. Mom. Jack. All of them had gone silent, stunned not by the numbers, but by the fact that I had finally stood up. Then I said it. "I'm not here to ruin your lives. I'm not kicking you out. But if you want to stay in this house, the house I co-own and pay taxes on, we're going to do things differently from now on." Mom's brows furrowed. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you either start treating me like a human being, or you start packing." Drew scoffed. "You can't be serious." I turned the folder around, showing him the signed copy of the deed. "I am, legally and emotionally." Stephanie leaned forward, arms crossed. "So what? You want rent checks? Apologies. What's the price tag for being part of this family now?" I met her stare. "Respect. That's the price. Honesty. Boundaries. Accountability." They all looked at each other, searching for someone to speak first. Finally, Jack. Quiet, timid Jack, cleared his throat. "We were wrong," he said. "You've done more for this family than any of us. I should have stood up for you sooner." Mom shot him a glare. But he didn't back down. I nodded. "Thank you, Jack. That's a start." Stephanie rolled her eyes but didn't say a word. That alone was a small miracle. Drew muttered, "Fine, whatever. You've made your point." "No," I said, "not yet, but I'm getting there. Because this wasn't about money anymore. It was about identity. And I was finally reclaiming mine. The Amelia they thought they could vote out didn't just come back stronger. She came back, owning the ground they stood on. I gathered my things slowly, not because I was stalling, but because I was savoring the silence. The kind that only comes after the truth has shaken every wall. Stephanie hovered by the staircase, arms still crossed, her expression unreadable. Mom sat stiff on the couch, clutching her mug like it was the last thing holding her together. Drew had retreated to a corner, pretending to scroll through his phone but clearly still reeling. And Jack? Well, Jack gave me a nod. Quiet but respectful. I zipped my bag and looked around the living room. The same space where I had once hung Christmas lights, wrapped gifts, and tried to believe I mattered. Now I knew better. I walked toward the door. "Where are you going?" Mom asked. "To my apartment," I said without looking back. "You know, the one I pay for, without any of your help." "We didn't mean to make you feel excluded," she added quickly. "We were just frustrated. We didn't think you'd take it so far." I turned around, hand on the doorknob. "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought I'd stand up for myself. You built your comfort on the idea that I'd always stay quiet. You didn't just exclude me, you erased me. And now? I'm taking myself back." I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold December air hit me, but it felt clean, free. And as I walked to my car, I realized something powerful. They didn't kick me out. I walked out, on my terms, with my dignity, and with every receipt in hand. This wasn't a breakdown. It was a breakthrough. And that red folder? It wasn't revenge. It was release. New Year's Day came quietly. No text from Mom. No fake apology from Stephanie. Not even a meme from Drew. And honestly, I didn't miss it. For the first time in my adult life, I woke up on January 1st with no guilt, no unspoken obligations, and no voice in my head whispering, "Call them. Keep the peace." Peace was already here. It wasn't loud. It didn't come wrapped in apologies or redemption arcs. It came in the form of coffee in my own kitchen, a walk in the park alone, laughter that didn't feel stolen. I sat at my desk that morning and did something I hadn't done in years. I made a list, not of goals, but of boundaries. I will not fund dysfunction. I will not apologize for growing. I will not attend gatherings where I am unwelcome in spirit. I will no longer beg to be respected by people who only know how to take. And then I made a second list. Things I wanted to do for me. Take that trip to Japan I kept putting off. Start the small business I'd been mentoring others to launch. Volunteer. Not out of guilt, but out of joy. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I didn't want revenge. What I wanted was a life I didn't have to recover from. And the more space I gave myself, the more I began to remember who I was before I was their fixer. Strong, smart, quietly powerful. I may have walked away from the only family I knew, but I was walking towards someone I'd long forgotten. Me. It was a Wednesday morning when it happened. I was answering emails at work, sipping my second coffee, and planning a solo weekend trip to the coast. Life had been quiet in the best way. Then my phone buzzed. "Jack?" I almost ignored it, but something about the preview, "I just want to talk," made me pause. I opened the message. "Amelia, I know I've never said much. Maybe that's part of the problem, but I've been thinking a lot since Christmas. What they did to you, what we allowed, was wrong. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet for coffee. Just us. No pressure. No expectations. Just to listen. Jack." I stared at the screen, unsure what I felt. Jack had always been the background figure. Quiet. Passive. Never cruel, but never brave either. And yet, he reached out, not to defend, not to deflect, but to take responsibility. I didn't reply right away. I sat with it, let it breathe. That evening, I reread the message 3 more times before finally typing. "One coffee, one conversation, no promises," he responded within seconds. "Thank you." I didn't know what I'd say. I didn't know if he'd truly understand. But for the first time in this whole mess, someone wasn't asking me to forget. He was asking to understand. And that meant something. Maybe the healing wouldn't start with the ones who shouted the loudest, but with the one who stayed quiet too long and finally chose to speak. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with brick walls, soft jazz, and the smell of fresh pastries in the air. Jack was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 mugs of coffee. He stood when he saw me, awkward, uncertain, but genuine. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded and sat down. "I'm not here for apologies, just honesty." He took a breath. "That's fair." For a few minutes, we sat in silence, sipping coffee, listening to plates clink in the background. Then he said it. "There was no vote, Amelia." I froze. "What?" He looked up, shame in his eyes. "Stephanie made it up. She told us she'd had enough, that you were toxic, controlling, and always trying to make us feel guilty. She framed it like we all agreed, but no one else was ever asked." My stomach turned. "So, you didn't vote me out?" He shook his head. "I didn't even know about it until she announced it. Drew was just going along with her. Your mom, she stayed quiet, like always." I stared at him, disbelief turning into something colder. "She exiled me, publicly, on Christmas. Lied, humiliated me in front of the whole family, and no one said anything." "I should have," Jack admitted. "I didn't have the courage. I regret it every day." I didn't speak. "Not yet," he continued. "I've started therapy. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to understand why I stayed silent all those years." I looked at him. Really looked. He was older, tired, but something about him was softer. Stripped of performance, honest. "I'm not asking you to forgive any of them," he said. "But I am asking if you'll let me be better. Start small, show up." For the first time, I considered the idea that maybe one person, just one, could unlearn what the rest refused to see. And in that moment, I realized, healing doesn't always begin with an apology. Sometimes, it starts with the truth. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the kind with brick walls, soft jazz, and the smell of fresh pastries in the air. Jack was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 mugs of coffee. He stood when he saw me, awkward, uncertain, but genuine. "Thanks for coming," he said. I nodded and sat down. "I'm not here for apologies, just honesty." He took a breath. "That's fair." For a few minutes, we sat in silence, sipping coffee, listening to plates clink in the background. Then he said it. "There was no vote, Amelia." I froze. "What?" He looked up, shame in his eyes. "Stephanie made it up. She told us she'd had enough, that you were toxic, controlling, and always trying to make us feel guilty. She framed it like we all agreed, but no one else was ever asked." My stomach turned. "So you didn't vote me out?" He shook his head. "I didn't even know about it until she announced it. Drew was just going along with her. Your mom, she stayed quiet, like always." I stared at him, disbelief turning into something colder. "She exiled me, publicly, on Christmas. Lied, humiliated me in front of the whole family, and no one said anything." "I should have," Jack admitted. "I didn't have the courage. I regret it every day." I didn't speak. "Not yet." He continued. "I've started therapy. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to understand why I stayed silent all those years." I looked at him, really looked. He was older, tired, but something about him was softer, stripped of performance, honest. "I'm not asking you to forgive any of them," he said, "but I am asking if you'll let me be better. Start small. Show up." For the first time, I considered the idea that maybe one person, just one, could unlearn what the rest refused to see. And in that moment, I realized, healing doesn't always begin with an apology. Sometimes, it starts with the truth. It had been 3 weeks since the cafe meeting with Jack. 3 weeks of quiet, of peace, of no calls, no drama, no manipulation. Until the knock on my door, I opened it. And there she was, Stephanie. Perfectly dressed, designer coat, flawless makeup, and a look on her face like nothing had happened. "Can we talk?" she asked, like she hadn't tried to erase me from my own family. I didn't invite her in. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed. "Talk." She gave a rehearsed sigh. "Look, I know things got out of hand. Christmas was a mess. But I think we both know this has gone too far." "Too far?" I repeated. You lied to the whole family, said there was a vote, tried to exile me in my own mother's house. She waved a manicured hand. Okay, yes. I may have exaggerated, but I had to. You were making everything about you. You kept acting like you were better than us because you made more money. I blinked. You used me like an ATM for 7 years. And when I stopped letting you, you cut me off. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. Look, the truth is, I've been applying for a job with a nonprofit that works with women's empowerment. They're doing background checks. They might talk to you. I need you to keep things neutral. I actually laughed. You're here because your image is in danger. She shrugged. Call it what you want. Just don't destroy my future over one stupid day. I met her eyes. I'm not destroying anything. I just stopped letting you take. And if your future is built on lies, maybe it's time it crumbles. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She just stood there, stunned. Then I said it. You kicked me out of the family on Christmas. But I built a new one, with boundaries, with truth, and without you. And I closed the door, not out of spite, but out of peace.